Hi there, and welcome to Flip the Script Season 2, Episode 2, How to Rank Sequences so that your reps are calling on the best sequences possible. My name is Beck Holland. I'm the CEO and founder of Flip the Script. Before we jump in here, if you do me one small favor, if you download the deck on the side of this session, because this deck and this session are like nerdy. I'm talking NASA level Elon Musk nerdy. So I want to make sure that you can follow along in each step of the way. And on that note, if Elon Musk or any employees of NASA are watching, I'm sorry, you're absolutely cool and not nerdy at all. Let's go ahead and jump in. So let's get nerdy, y'all. In terms of the agenda today, there's going to be 6 different pieces. Number 4, we're going to start with the data points that you're going to need before we dig in. So this is going to be a prep list of, all the chocolate chips, flour, baking powder, etc., that you're going to need for the rest of the session. But this is going to be the data points that you should dig up before we go into the session. Number 2, we're going to talk about definitions and can we define the criteria that matter to us in terms of ranking. Number 3, defining what immediate means, defining what valuable means, and defining what easy means. So those are the 3 variables that we're going to talk about today. So typically whenever you're thinking about an analysis, usually it's, is this important and is this immediate? I wanted to throw into the gamut, is this easy? Because there's a lot of deals that account executives are thinking about or meetings that SDRs are booking because it was easy to do, not necessarily because it was immediate or very valuable. So we're going to throw that variable into the mix. And then we're going to talk about how to calculate final rankings. We're going to do 3 different kinds of rankings based on preference. So I'm going to run the entire gamut today, but you can, full disclosure, choose whichever model makes the most sense for your team at this time. So let's start with what you'll need before we begin. What you'll need before we begin, number 1, is the number of average steps it took your reps to book a meeting for each sequence. So, sometimes it's 4, or sometimes it's anywhere up to 15 or 20 steps. It depends on the sequence. So you want to gather from a data perspective for each sequence that you're running within your book, how many steps did it take for them on average to book a meeting? Number 2, the percentage of leads that convert into that meeting. Keep in mind it's percentage, so not raw volume. We want to make sure that we're accounting for the inputs. Number 3, the amount of prospects that were loaded for you. So for every sequence, you need to do a deep dive and this is going to be a percentage game as well. So for instance, for marketing for content downloads, that would be 100% of the leads were loaded into the sequence for the rep. So they didn't have to do any digging. So this is going to come into play with ease. But a lot of the different marketing initiatives the percentage of leads are going to be loaded for them. So you can do a percentage game today, but usually it's going to be polar. It's going to be either 100% was loaded or 0% was loaded. Whereas cold outbound, for instance, 0% is loaded for the reps typically because they have to do it themselves. Number 4, the prospect title of the lead, the buyer persona and level that are typically booked for these sequences. So you want to define into 2, both buyer persona and the level of their roles. So for instance, my last company, we sold into 5 different buyer personas, sales enablement, sales operations, revenue leaders, SDR leaders, and account executive leaders. And then within each one of those buyer personas and disciplines, we sold into several different levels of hierarchy. So anything from manager to director, head of, CXO, vice president, etc. But there are 2 different pieces to that. Which one is netting up for all the respective sequences? What kind of buyer personas are they typically resulting in that are booking a meeting? Because these are personalization sequences, not based on buyer persona. And number 2, what is the level that you're typically booking for a meeting for these sequences? So we know what is the net result of who is booking the meetings for these sequences, excuse me. Number 5, the percentage of closed-won deals off of the back end for the meetings that are booked for each sequence. So we are going to go into where this fits in, but TLDR, you want to understand for your sequences, which ones are the ones that are netting the highest quality meetings in terms of the percentage of closed won on the back end. Some of them, maybe there's higher buyer intent, etc. So we always want to gather, I think it's Sherlock Holmes that said, data, I can't make bricks without clay. Same thing. We want to go data. We can't make sequence rankings without clay. So you want to go ahead and dig down to how many closed won deals came out of each sequence. And then number 6, the sales cycle length for each sequence. For the deals that were closed for each respective sequence, what was the average sales cycle? Because that comes into play in terms of ease. So these are the 6 data points that you will need. So I hope everyone has their chocolate chips and flour ready, etc. Number 2, let's go into defining criteria. So defining criteria, there's going to be 3 different variables that we're going to look at today. So typically you'll see 2 that are very prominent in analyses like this. Number 1, how immediately do I need to call on this lead? So in some instances, immediance comes into play. This isn't a deal that's always on the table. This is a deal that's on the table for a certain amount of time. So when I'm thinking about how to prioritize my day, I'm thinking a lot about this of like, what's the timeline and what's the expiration date on this lead or on this item that I have to do, because it helps me with ranking when I'm going to do it. Number 2, how valuable is the lead? So, a lot of sales reps, obviously, they're very monomaniacal about understanding what are the most valuable leads and what are the most valuable sequences on the back of that are causing those leads to convert. And then number 3, how easy are these leads to sell typically? How easy are these leads to sell, and how easy is it for the SDR to book the meeting with them via these sequences? So let's talk about immediance first. I rank on immediance, and I listed, full disclosure, if you go into the session in season 2 on the comprehensive messaging system for account executives, I go into all the different types of sequences that you could be using, whether that's SDR and AE. If you go into personalization at scale, for instance, I give a ranking of just the SDR sequences. But TLDR, there are 16 different sequences that have to do with SDR in specific, and 14 that are account executive in specific. And in some cases, if a full cycle account executive is running these sequences, then they would do all 30. Out of those 30 sequences, I broke it down. 15 of them are time sensitive. So let's start from the top. Number 1, event attendees. So after an event, the proximity to the event is key for the lead. Number 2, content downloads. So how long ago did the person download the content? There's a shelf date on that. Number 3, webinar registrants. Number 4, IPO. 5, company funding. 6, executive churn. Very, very time sensitive for that one. Buyer intent leads. So what buyer intent is any kind of, if someone is researching your software on, let's say, a third-party review site like G2, then that's going to be a buyer intent lead, because they can pipe that data back to you that a company was looking at your software. So buyer intent is going to be high immediance, because if someone is looking at your software, your competitor software on a site like G2, they're probably actually pretty close to buying, or they might be in a competitive deal. So you want to make sure you get to it very quickly. Number 8, a renewal for a competitive deal. Let's say that they chose your competitor and then they're coming up for renewal. That's time sensitive, because you want to make sure they don't renew again. 9, channel play. If they just bought a software that you typically, they will bundle buy for you guys. Like, I'll give you an instance. A lot of times whenever people are buying a sales engagement software like Outreach, they would want to also buy conversation intelligence software like Chorus, because they want to figure out what's going on in those conversations. So a channel play would be they bought Outreach, and so Chorus needs to reach out very quickly to the proximity so that they bundle buy together. You'll see a lot of companies actually do a bundle sale with both of those softwares like that. Number 10, a prospect product release. So let's say your prospect released a product that's very, is a trigger for them to want to buy your software. So, great instance is, if I were to buy ballet shoes, then it's probably pretty likely, or I were to, buy ballet shoes, and it's probably pretty likely that I'm going to need some kind of dance studio or dance class that I'm going to be using those in. So if your prospect releases some kind of product that is hue of you, that it would make sense for them to buy your product, then that's going to be a high immediate sequence. Number 11, email opens. So this is when your prospect opens your prospect emails from any respective sequence out of the 30. Number 12, hypergrowth. If they're going through a hypergrowth phase, and these aren't ranked in order, we will get into that in the next slide. This is just the comprehensive book that timing comes into play. But 12, hypergrowth. 13, if you see it's off center, number 1, whoever wants to correct my grammar, here you go. But high value MQL, if someone MQLs, it means they became a marketing qualified lead. So there could be a litany of reasons of why this happens. But, a great example is they were visiting your website and they opened enough of your marketing emails. So they queued up as a marketing qualified lead to your marketing team. So they piped them through. They demoed in the past. So maybe this is someone who demoed in the past, saw your product, and maybe they're coming up on 6 or 7 months of they didn't make a purchasing decision, or they requested a demo and they didn't actually schedule the demo. That would be time sensitive as well. And then LinkedIn engagement. So this is the least automated sequence, but are they engaging with your content on LinkedIn? Because there's usually shelf life in terms of how much they remember. So just a random stat that helps you understand why some of these are immediate is 15% average retention is typical for human beings. So after you watch a session like this, 15% of it on average, a human will remember. So in terms of LinkedIn content that they engage with or a content download, even if they read the piece of content, even if, they really, really liked the webinar that they were a part of, it's on average 15% that they're going to retain. So you want to make sure that you get to that lead pretty quickly. So in terms of how you can rank it, so I started a spreadsheet essentially, and I couldn't go into it today because I needed to stay in the deck, but there were several different tabs and we'll go into all the different tabs. But the first thing that I did is I created a tab that's called immediate, and you can list all of the sequences that you are running that have some kind of shelf life. And I typically, on a scale of 1 to 10, I rank how immediate I think personally they are. There is no way, we don't want to boil the ocean and overcook the goose, so to speak. But there is no way from my perspective to understand from a regression analysis view of which one is more immediate than the other, especially based on the CRM data that we typically have in the industry. So I just rank on a scale of 1 to 10, how quickly I want to call on someone and how quickly I think that this lead is going to expire. You'll see that on the previous slide that I basically did 15 in here. One that I added in here because it is a COVID theme is Act of God. So an Act of God sequence, if you'll see number 6, is basically a sequence that should be enacted whenever something like a global pandemic happens and all of a sudden there is a new use case or a new fervorance that your buyers want to buy your product. So great example, if I were selling Charmin toilet paper, come end of March of 2020, I would have been running that Act of God sequence because most people, it becomes less of a personalization game and more of just a blanket relevance game at that point because most people have the high buyer intent. So you can drop your bar in terms of all, the things necessarily that you have to do to get their time and attention because they'll come to you. So I added in the Act of God sequence, but basically if you create a spreadsheet, go nerdy with me. This is a full disclosure, very nerdy session. Create a spreadsheet and say, okay, my 3 tabs here are going to be immediate, valuable, and easy. For the immediate tab, I'm going to list out all of my sequences that are immediate, and I'm going to rank them on a scale of 1 to 10 of how immediate I think these are. So I wouldn't go, 1 through 16. I would say on a scale of 1 to 10, how immediate do I think these are? So I lumped them in here that email opens is a high 10. You've got a 9 for anything from Act of God to executive churn, buyer intent leads, renewal, who went competitive and LinkedIn engagement, and so on and so forth. You can read, but I rank them accordingly. So I am always, on a side note, going to teach on technique and structure, but then let you guys, if you're sitting here watching this video, I don't necessarily know your business. I would say there's a high likelihood that I don't. So I'm going to give you the structure of how you can do something like this, but always make sure that it makes sense, for your business and your stage where you're at. So now that we know about immediance, let's talk about what does valuable mean. So a valuable lead, this is not necessarily an exhaustive list, but a valuable lead, to me, what I had drilled it down to are the following components. Number 1, which sequences are causing the biggest deal size to come out from the back end? So I would rank on a variable that's relative to your company. So for instance, I sold a conversation intelligence software. How lucrative that deal was based on how many salespeople they had, because we sold 2 sales seats. So a deal size, I would rank the deal size in 3 different buckets. Did they have anywhere from 20 to 50 sales reps, 50 to 200, or 200 plus? Because it helped me understand that was a leading indicator on whether this was going to be a really good hypothetical deal if we did close it. So I would not go on employee size. A lot of marketing teams do that, but you want to pick the leading indicator that's specific to your business that typically means it's a bigger or smaller sale for you before you do discovery and sell into them. Number 2, lead conversion. So something that's a valuable sequence is a sequence that a lot of people are converting on average. So a lot of people are taking a meeting. So it helps you know that sequence is really good, or the people you're loading in are really good, or maybe a mixture of both. But you want to understand from an outcome perspective, what are the sequences that are causing the most percentage of leads to convert. Number 3, title conversion. So out of the meetings that were set from these respective sequences, if you would rank based on what are the kinds of titles that you want to see, and how many, from a percentage view, on average, are coming through the pipe whenever you're running this sequence. So, let's say this is going to be different for every company. But let's say you really, really like to sell into vice presidents of sales and directors of sales enablement. So I would look through my sequences, all the respective 30 that I was running, and understand how many directors of sales enablement were being booked out of these sequences from a percentage view, and how many VPs of sales were being booked from a percentage view. So I could understand in terms of title, hierarchy level, and buyer persona, what are the sequences that are doing me the most favors. And then number 4 is deal conversion. So in the first item, we had deal size. So we knew, okay, the deals that are coming out of this sequence from these booked meetings are very, very big deals for our company. And in the 4th case scenario for deal conversion, we want to understand, is there a high volume or percentage volume of deals that are coming out of or deals that are closing out of this sequence? So let's say in the first, example for one sequence, you have 10 meetings being booked, and the second sequence, you have 20 meetings being booked. However, in the first sequence, out of those 10, you had 9 that were really big deals. And in the second type sequence, you only had 8, even though there were 20 meetings set. So you would say, okay, on average, actually, the first sequence is the one for me. Whereas in this 4th case scenario, you would be measuring, okay, I have sequence 1 and, 15% of my prospects are converting into a meeting or converting into a closed won deal out of the meetings that were set. And sequence 2, it is 20% of the meetings that were set turned into an actual deal. So in that case scenario, number 2 would be the best sequence for you. So in terms of how to put this in the chart, so again, you're going to have all these different variables. So immediate, valuable, and easy. So immediate, you just put them in and you rank them for yourself on a scale of 1 to 10. How immediate do you think that this sequence is? A lot of them, so I only have 16 listed here, meaning there's a delta of 40 sequences that I said immediate doesn't mean anything, meaning cold outbound, it doesn't matter when I get to them. Whereas in value, so I have all of these sequences listed out. If they are in light blue, it means they're an SDR sequence. If they are in purple, it means they are typically an account executive sequence. Full cycle account executives would call on both. But basically, I am ranking within this tab for value 4 different metrics here. What's the trigger that matters to me? What is the percentage of leads that are turning into a meeting? What are the percentage of titles that are hitting the title that I want, either in terms of hierarchy or in terms of buyer persona? And then what is the percentage of closed won off of the back end for that sequence? and I am putting in the number here. So I'm saying, okay, so rank for number 2, let's take, for instance, we want to understand how many of those leads are turning into a meeting from the SDR perspective. Maybe I load 100 prospects, and in sequence 1, which we'll go back to, sequence 1 up here was content downloads. Maybe sequence 1, 20% of the leads were turning into a meeting. Whereas in sequence 2, which is event attendees, 23% were turning into a meeting. So you want to put in these raw percentages and then give each sequence a ranking for this variable. How do I rank these sequences in terms of, sequentially, which ones are the most valuable to me? The lower numbers are the better. So you want to say number 1 is the ultimate sequence that I would want to call on, down to number 30 would be the least valuable sequence to me. But you want to do those across the 4 variables of value. So again, we defined a value as, is this a very, very big deal size? So what's the ranking here? Is this, how many percentage of leads turn into a meeting? What's the ranking here for the sequences? And give me a raw rank. Percentage of titles that I want that are coming out of this sequence, and give me a raw title here, or total here. And then out of the percentage of the meetings that did come out of the sequence, how many of those were closed won, and then give me a raw ranking there. And then in this last box, we're going to do a total rank. So the total rank should be ranking 1 plus 2 plus 3 plus 4. And then divide, and you can just do that in raw aggregate and say, okay, what is the total on the back end? The lower the total, the more valuable the rank. So, let's say in this instance, it's hard to do without the actual spreadsheet, but let's say in this instance that sequence 1, which was content downloads, was, ranked a 50. And then event attendees ranked a 47, and then webinar registrants ranked a 53. So that would mean event attendees is the best sequence, webinar registrants or content downloads is second, and then webinar registrants is third. So again, always remember whenever you're doing these raw totals that the lower the number in terms of this ranking value should be the more high value. So if it's a percentage of leads that turn into a meeting is 20%, and 1 is 18%, then I would say, okay, 20% is rank 1 and, 18% is rank 2 because that's the metric for me. So that's how you metric value. So stay with me. We're going to get into final rankings in a minute, but stay with me for one more slide. Let's go into defining what easy means. So what easy means in terms of selling is going to be a conglomeration of 6 things. So number 1, something that can affect ease of either booking the meeting or closing the deal. Number 1 is, are they a current shopper? Do they have high buyer intent? Someone who's looking to buy cotton candy and just can't figure out which stand is much easier than convincing someone who doesn't know they want cotton candy to begin with. So a current shopper of software is going to be much easier to win over because they're already in market. So I'd argue this is one of the highest value in terms of what is easy in terms of the sales rep is what we would call buyer intent. So you want to rake your sequences that are predicated on the shopper already being in market. So for instance, we'll do a sequence for buyer intent or dark funnel through providers like Bombora or 6sense. But basically people who are already in market, is this a sequence that we know that they're already in market before we even reach out to them? And that's actually the premise for the sequence. Number 2, Active God, like I mentioned. Active God is something that is completely third party, something that it affects a lot of different users or a global economy because of it. So a great example is the pandemic. The pandemic has caused a spike for some products and a decline for some products. So no disrespect to Zoom sellers, but it's not like Zoom sellers all of a sudden got 15 times better and that's why you're seeing a climb in the purchase of their software, or that employees of WeWork all of a sudden forgot how to sell. And so you're seeing a massive decline. So an Active God is some kind of third-party instance of a pandemic hit. All of a sudden people need to buy some kind of web conferencing software because they're selling, more remotely than ever before. School districts are having to use Zoom. And so an Active God is some kind of predication on some kind of variable that really affected the ease of sale. So, again, Zoom, for instance, in this, an act of God sequence or an act of God premise would be something that they are running based on relevance at that point, because it's to a bunch of different people. You have a lot of different TAM that they want to gobble up, and they want to choke down the personalization because they don't have to raise their bar of selling so high anymore, because they're really just, it's speed to lead, and how can I quickly get this software out of the door? I really hope that Zoom employees, sellers in specific, aren't watching this. You're doing a great job. Number 3, preloaded sequences make things easy. So as an SDR, a sequence, for instance, with a bunch of prospects that are in there because they downloaded content is much easier on me to book meetings than someone or a cold outbound sequence, because of one thing. In the content download instance, marketing loaded all the leads. And in the cold outbound instance, I have to load all the leads as a rep. So loading leads takes a lot of time, a lot of effort, a lot of pain. No, I don't want you to sell me your software and how you can quicken that process. I've heard of all of them, at least I think, unless you aren't part of the normal heavy hitters. But this is a major pain point for the industry. Is how do I quickly just find the freaking people that I can sell to and their data? Of like email address, direct dial, etc. So preloaded sequence, the reason it makes it easier is because if I have just a list from marketing of people who hit ICT, which is ideal customer title, they hit ICC, which means ideal customer company, and they are preloaded in my sequence, it makes it easier for me to book meetings because I don't have to go through the very, very apoplectic act of having to overcome all of this data hunt to find someone that I want to talk to. Number 4, step conversion. So something that is a good litmus test on which sequences are easier to book meetings for SDRs, at least, is how many steps it took them to book a meeting on average. So you should take a look at all your sequences, understand that maybe for content downloads, it took you 15 steps, and maybe webinar registrants, it took you 5. So obviously, in terms of steps and the amount of time and alacrity that they have to put into to cause conversion, that in the latter case scenario, it's much easier. So step conversion is something I'd be looking at. And then lead conversion. This is a great way to rank on the percentage of leads that are going through a sequence that result in a booked meeting. So out of, let's say, in content downloads, I had 100 leads and 20 of them converted, giving me a 20% conversion. That's really great conversion. Versus, webinar registrants, only 15 out of 100 converted. So obviously the content downloads is more lucrative in terms of the percentage of leads that are converting through. And the last thing we would look at is sales cycle conversion. So for out of the deals that close out of these respective sequences, which ones are the ones that it only took a shorter amount of time to actually close the deal? Was it a very arduous climb for my seller? So a great example is buyer intent will probably be a quicker sales cycle because people are already in my market. Versus someone who's cold outbound, it's probably going to take a little longer because you're going to have to add in some level of educational process because they don't know who you are. So those are the 6 metrics. How you'd put it into the spreadsheet is, again, so remember that we had, all the way back here, we had these tabs. So we had immediate, valuable, and easy. Immediate we put in there and ranked ourselves on a scale of 1 to 10. Valuable, we ranked them in terms from a data perspective, the sequences, what they were causing in terms of each of these 4 data variable points. We ranked them in terms of where is their rank amongst the other sequences for all 4 variables. We aggregate totaled those into their overall total. And then we re-ranked them based on which one was the lowest in terms of number, because that's the most high valuable sequence for us. And then for easy, we want to basically do the same type of thing that we did for the valuable tab. These are all the sequences that we have. Remember that the blue ones are for the SDR sequences. The purple ones are for the AE sequences. And if you're a self-prospecting AE, shout out to you for watching this session, that all 30 would be ones that you could use. And again, go to the Account Executive Playbook if you want to hear more. But basically, you're going to have 6 variables here. The first 3 is, are they already in market? Percentage of leads that were provided to you without a data hunt. You're going to re-rank based on raw rank for each respective variable. Some of them are inverted, some of them aren't. So, use your very, very smart brain. How many steps did it take to convert into a meeting? So if one took 5 and the next took 15, then I would rank number 1, obviously higher than number 2 because it took 15 steps. And then the last 6 variables are percentage of leads that convert into a meeting, sales cycle length, and is there an immediate need, meaning was this an act of God? And you'll get the same type of result that you got in the value tab of I'm going to get a total number here, and then I'm going to invert them to understand what is the overall ranking for here. So, if one number is, let's say, content downloads got a 75 total, and webinar registrants got an 80 total, then obviously content downloads is a lower number. So that's going to be, my overall rank. It's going to rank higher than webinar registrants. So you should do those based on a nomenclature that helps you understand what is the easiest meeting, what is the most valuable meeting, and what is the ones that actually require some kind of immediate action, and what is the ranking within that. So now we know those 3 variables. Sorry, I'm just really liking this session. We are full-blown in nerddom Elon Musk Harvardville. So let's talk about how we rank these sequences. So full disclosure, I put together 3 different options for how you can calculate final rankings. One, for the people who wanted to include, we'll kind of get into it, but basically a traditional final ranking, kind of spin on a traditional final ranking, depending on how you want to do it. And then number 3, if you just want to throw out ease and you want to be from the parochial school of thought of it's important and immediate, and that's the only variables I want back, and get the stupid red out of your hair, and I know that you think you're hip with this nose ring, but let's just do immediate important. Option number 3 is going to be for you. So let's start with option number 1. If you want to do a traditional final ranking, then essentially you want to pull from the immediate tab, what was the raw ranking there for your respective sequences? What was the raw ranking on value? What was the raw ranking on ease? And then you want to have a total over here, where you basically would have overall rank. For this first option, I basically said, okay, I'm going to bifurcate, meaning I'm going to split these sequences in 2 categories. I want to talk about the immediate sequences in and of themselves that have any level of immediance, and I want to call on them first, and then get to and rank within themselves the non-immediate sequences, and not basically base it on a ranking system. So that's traditional of, okay, I'm going to view the sequences that are immediate, and I'm going to split these. So these are the ones that are immediate for me, the top 16. So I'd rank them on immediance, rank them on variable, rank them on ease from the data from these 2 tabs, and then get a total and give an overall rank. And I would give my new sequence order of which sequences I should call on in which order for my reps, so that I know that I get the most meetings and the most high value meetings in terms of revenue for my org. And then I split down into the second category. So again, this is going to be these are not immediate at all, whereas these are. And so I'm splitting these 2 and saying, I'm going to get to these first, regardless of their level of immediance. And then I'm going to get to this grouping second, who had no immediance trigger. So again, you would rank these on value, rank these on ease, and give an overall rank in new sequence order. So you can throw out the immediance rank because these have no immediance. They're all tied at 0. That's what my parents would say about me and my siblings, all tied at 0. Just kidding. Or am I? Second type is final rankings with immediance not tabbed to 0. So basically in this case scenario, instead of bifurcating into 2 groupings of immediate and not immediate, what if I want to put a rank to immediance and say, I'm going to let that play part of the factor, but I'm not going to separate on 2 groups. No problem, but in this case scenario, you would basically set the ranking of immediate to 1, 6, 10, and 15. So basically, if you have 3 people tied at second, then the next variable should be 5. But basically, you want to put in their rank of immediance at 1 through 15 or 16, depending on how many sequences you have in there, if you include Act of God. put that in the rank on on value, on ease, and total overall rank in new sequence order. But basically for the second grouping, the only difference between these two ranking systems is in the first situation, you just said, I'm going to call on all of these sequences second, and I'm just going to rank them in and of themselves. Where in the second type, you are going to give them a rank on immediance of 30. So you're going to penalize them of like, hey, I do want these to intermix and intertwine with the other sequences in terms of ranking based on immediance, but I'm going to ding them because none of these are immediate at all. So I'm going to give them a net score of 30 because remember, higher score, the worse in terms of when you should be calling on them. So I would do the exact same thing as you did once you have that of like, okay, I'm going to go 1 through 15. You know, if sequences are tied in terms of immediance, give them the tied value and then skip to the next respective number. And I'm going to give this second bracket of sequences that have no immediance a score of 30, and then give them a rank on value, rank on ease, give them the total and overall rank, and then reorder your sequences based on the outcome. And then the last one, this is the nose ring one where I went into a self-righteous diatribe. The last one, if you just want to rank on, is this immediate and is this important? If you come from that school of thought of, you know, those are the only two variables I want to be thinking about, no problem. I would throw out ease and say, I'm going to rank on immediate and I'm going to rank on value. And then I'm going to total overall rank and then new sequence order. So again, you've got the first 15 sequences here over on this side. Sorry, I kind of feel like a weather woman sometimes. So you got the first ranking for the first 15 sequences over here. And then you have the last ranking for, and I included an immediate score on this one. As I said, everyone's tied at 30. And I wanted them to intertwine. But basically, you can give them a rank based on immediance and then based on 30 if there's no immediance in your opinion. And then rank on value based on the data that you saw in the previous spreadsheet. And throw out the ease tab. Don't even easy breezy peasy. You don't have to worry about ease. And give it a overall rank, a total, an overall rank based on that total, and then a new sequence order based on who was the lowest down to the respective highest total. So in summary, I know that ranking sequences seems like it's undoable. And it seems like we should just be kind of going off of instinct. But I would say, especially as you get into mid-market and especially as you get into enterprise, one of the smartest things that you can do for your org is making your decisions based off of data and based off of instinct. So if you want to rearrange on something based on instinct, that's fine. But I would always suggest that you let the data do the talking, be very open-handed about the result. And instead of saying like, I really like content downloads, or I really think we should sell into this buyer persona, or I really feel like we should sell into event leads, you know, within 3 minutes because that makes things faster. Always, always, always seek for data because data, you can't make bricks without clay. Whew. So that is everything. Thanks so much, everybody, for watching. If you like this session, you want to hear more, go to the other nerdy sessions on the website so you can see a couple of different sales topics just like this one. And if you really like this session, if you go to LinkedIn, tag Flip the Script, me, Elon Musk, and your top 2 takeaways so I know what you want to hear more of. But either way, I hope you have a great rest of your day.